My name is Renata Caldwell. I'm 41. 3 weeks ago, my sister-in-law stood behind a microphone at the Meadowfield Chamber of Commerce annual Small Business Awards dinner and told 230 people, including a reporter from the Meadowfield Gazette, the deputy mayor, and a man who'd requested our LLC's capitalization documents, that Caldwell & Sons Catering was a 4-generation legacy built on nothing but sweat and love. She said it while standing 6 feet from a kitchen I financed, in a building I made possible, wearing an apron embroidered with a company name that exists in its current form, because I wrote a check for $390,000. She didn't mention my name, not once. What none of them knew, not Vanessa, not the reporter, not the deputy mayor, not even my own mother-in-law sitting at table 4 with a cloth napkin folded on her lap, was that my name was on every document that mattered. Not the signage, not the website, not the napkins with the cursive logo, the promissory note, the operating agreement, the personal guarantee filed with the county recorder's office in Franklin County. Before I tell you what happened when that investor in the 3rd row stood up and asked his question, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I always wonder how far a story like this travels. I grew up in Briar Falls, Ohio, a town small enough that your last name was your resume and your parents' reputation was your credit score. My mother, Helen Oakes, taught 4th grade at Roosevelt Elementary for 31 years. She had a system for grading papers that involved 4 colors of pen and a kitchen timer, and she never once called in sick. My father, Gerald Oakes, taught high school chemistry at Briar Falls Central until the year his hands started shaking too much to hold the beaker steady. He retired in March. He was diagnosed in May, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from the first scan to the funeral. I was 23. He left me $214,000, a combination of a life insurance policy he'd taken out in 1991 and a savings account he'd been feeding quietly since 1987. My mother didn't know about the savings account. She found out when the estate attorney, a man named Louis Grenier with an office above a dry cleaner on Main Street, opened the folder and pulled out a post-it note stuck to the inside cover. My father's handwriting. Blocky. All capitals. For Renata. Not for fixing. For building. My mother cried. Not because of the money. Because he'd planned for me even while he was dying and hadn't told her. She said, "That's the most Gerald thing he ever did." I didn't touch the money. Not for 6 years. I put it in a brokerage account, a mix of index funds and short-term bonds, and I let it sit. By the time I needed it, it had grown to just over $340,000. Compound interest is patient. So was I. I was working as a financial analyst at a regional consulting firm in Columbus called Braddock & Weil. 60-hour weeks, salary reviews that always landed on exceeds expectations, and raises that always landed on, unfortunately, the budget this cycle. I was good at my job. Specifically, I was good at forensic adjacent work, finding where money hid inside a business, tracing capital flows through LLCs and holding companies, identifying discrepancies between what a balance sheet said and what a bank statement proved. Turns out that's a useful skill when you're about to hand your inheritance to someone else's family. I didn't know that yet. I met Dean Caldwell at a college friend's wedding in October 2014. The reception was at a barn venue outside Delaware, Ohio. String lights, hay bales, a dessert table that looked like a magazine spread. Dean was the caterer's son. Not a guest. He was helping break down tables at midnight because 2 servers hadn't shown, and his father had called him in as a favor. He was sweating through his shirt collar and apologizing to a drunk bridesmaid about the crab cake temperature. She was yelling. He was not. I watched him absorb her frustration like a sponge absorbs water, completely, without wringing out. When she finally walked away, he looked at me across the table, half smiled, and said, "For what it's worth, the crab cakes were fine." I liked him immediately. Dean was kind in the way that only certain men are, quietly, habitually, without scorekeeping. He remembered what you said 3 conversations ago. He asked follow-up questions about things you'd mentioned in passing. He drove 40 minutes on a Wednesday night to bring me soup when I had bronchitis, and we'd only been dating 5 weeks. He showed up at my apartment with a brown paper bag, a bottle of Gatorade, and a handwritten note that said, "This is my grandmother's recipe. Don't tell my sister I gave it to you." That sister was Vanessa. I should have paid more attention to the warning in that sentence. He told me about the catering business on our third date like it was a confession. Like he was embarrassed that his family's thing was tablecloths and chafing dishes instead of something with a stock ticker. I told him my family's thing was chalk dust and periodic tables. He laughed until he choked on his beer. We got married in September 2016. Small ceremony. His family's backyard in Meadowfield, a half-acre lot with a stone patio Earl had built himself in 2003. 42 guests. Dolores, Dean's mother, made the cake, a lemon genoise with buttercream frosting that leaned slightly to the left. Nobody mentioned the lean. Earl, Dean's father, gave a toast that ran 4 minutes and mentioned Dean's name 11 times and mine twice. I counted. I shouldn't have counted, but I did. Because even then, I could feel the pattern before I could name it. The Caldwell family had a gravitational center, and it wasn't me. It wasn't even Dean. It was the business. And the business had a voice, and that voice was becoming Vanessa's. Caldwell and Sons Catering had operated out of Meadowfield, Ohio, since 1979. Earl's father, Douglas Caldwell, started it doing church picnics and Rotary Club dinners. By the time I married Dean, the business was barely a business. It was more like a habit the family couldn't break. They had a commercial kitchen lease on a space on Brewer Street they couldn't really afford. $3,200 a month for a kitchen that needed a new hood system and had a walk-in cooler that sounded like a lawnmower. 2 refrigerated vans, both with over 190,000 miles, and transmission problems the mechanic described as optimistic. A client list that hadn't meaningfully grown since 2011. A reputation built on nostalgia and the fact that Douglas Caldwell had once catered the governor's regional fundraiser in 1988. Revenue in 2016, the year I married Dean, was $188,000. I know the exact number because Dean showed me the books 3 months after our wedding, not to ask for help. Because he trusted me, because he knew what I did for a living, and he wanted someone to tell him the truth. The truth was not good. Margins were 11%, which in food service is survival, not success. They were pricing jobs based on 2004 rate cards that hadn't been updated because Earl believed raising prices was ungrateful. The liability insurance was underwritten for a company doing half their actual event volume. One slip-and-fall lawsuit would have ended them. The vendor contracts had no escalation clauses, no volume discounts, no exclusivity protections. The website was a single page with a stock photo of a shrimp cocktail that wasn't even theirs. I reverse image searched it once and found it on a Getty Images listing from 2009. I saw all of this. I said nothing. For a while. Then Vanessa happened. Vanessa Caldwell is Dean's younger sister. She was 36 in 2017. She'd spent 8 years in pharmaceutical sales, regional territory, mid-Atlantic, and had been, by her own account, killing it. Then she got laid off in a restructuring that eliminated her entire division. She moved back to Meadowfield with a communications degree from Ohio State, a leased Audi she could no longer afford, and an unshakable belief that confidence is the same thing as competence. She didn't ease into the family business. She landed on it. Within 3 weeks of coming home, she'd redesigned the logo, a serif font replaced with a sans serif that she called Modern but Heritage. She launched an Instagram account. She created a tagline, Legacy on every plate, and had it printed on cocktail napkins, business cards, and the back of a new apron design, before anyone in the family had voted on it or, frankly, been asked. Dolores loved it. She told everyone at church that Vanessa was saving the business. Earl loved it, because Dolores loved it. Dean didn't love it, and didn't say so, because Dean wanted everyone to get along, and wanting everyone to get along is how quiet people lose their names. Within 6 months, Vanessa had made herself the face of Caldwell and Sons. She ran client meetings. She did tastings. She booked a segment on a local Columbus morning show, a 4-minute spot where she stood behind a charcuterie board and described the business as our grandmother's dream, carried forward by family hands. She wore a white blouse and gold earrings, and smiled like she'd invented the concept of feeding people. She mentioned Dean once, In passing, she mentioned me, not at all, 0 times, which, mathematically, is the same as not mentioning, but emotionally, it felt deliberate. It felt architectural. I started noticing things, small things at first, then less small. At Thanksgiving 2017, Dolores introduced me to a neighbor named Phyllis as Dean's wife. Not Renata, not our daughter-in-law, not the woman who reorganized your entire vendor payment system last month. Dean's wife, as if I were an attachment, an accessory that came with the model. At Christmas that year, Vanessa posted a family photo on the business Instagram. The caption read, 4 generations of Caldwells, 1 kitchen, 1 dream. I was in the photo. I was not tagged. I was not named. I was standing on the far right, slightly out of focus, like a person who'd wandered into someone else's portrait. At a New Year's Eve party at the Caldwell house, I walked into the kitchen to refill my glass and overheard Vanessa talking to a linen supplier named Greg Halloran. She was telling him, casually, between bites of a cracker, that the family had self-funded every expansion. I was standing 8 feet away. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't need to. I was invisible. I thought, no, you didn't. Because by then, I had already written the check. It happened in October 2017. Dean came to me one evening, not begging, not dramatic, not performing need. He was honest, plain. The Brewer Street kitchen lease was expiring. The landlord, a property management company out of Cleveland, wanted a 40% rent increase, from $3,200 to $4,480 a month. The hood system needed replacing regardless, and there was a better space, a former restaurant space on Tillman Avenue, closer to the highway, with proper ventilation, a loading dock, and room for a prep line that could handle 3 simultaneous events. The build-out cost, $220,000. Equipment lease deposit, $95,000. First and last month's rent, permits, inspections, signage, another $75,000. Total, $390,000. Dean didn't ask me for a gift. He didn't frame it as our future. He asked me for a loan, formally, transparently. He said, I'll pay you back. I'll put it in writing. I just need you to believe this can work. I believed him, but I also did something that felt, at the time, almost clinical, almost cold. Almost like I was betraying the warmth of a marriage by introducing the language of commerce into it. I called my attorney, a woman named Priya Menon, based in Columbus, who I'd worked with on 2 consulting engagements at Braddock and Weil. I had Priya draft a promissory note, formal, notarized, $390,000 at 3.2% annual interest, with a 10-year amortizing repayment schedule, secured by the LLC's assets, with a personal guarantee from the LLC itself. I also had Priya review the Caldwell & Sons operating agreement, a boilerplate document Earl had gotten from a LegalZoom template in 2006, and add a clause. Section 9.4. Section 9.4 stated that any creditor holding a secured note above $250,000 against the LLC had the right to call the note and petition for judicial dissolution if scheduled payments were missed for more than 90 consecutive days. Dean signed without hesitation. He read every page, he initialed every clause. Then he kissed my forehead and said, "You're the smartest person I've ever met." I didn't feel smart. I felt like I was building a fire exit in a house I hoped would never burn. $390,000. From my father's savings. From his life insurance. From compound interest earned over 6 patient years. I want you to hear that number and hold it, because it's going to come back. The business grew. The Tillman Avenue kitchen was beautiful. 1,200 square feet of stainless steel, 2 walk-in coolers, a 6-burner commercial range, a prep line long enough to stage a wedding and a corporate luncheon on the same Saturday morning. Dean hired 2 sous chefs, a woman named Adara who'd trained at the Culinary Institute, and a man named Tomas who'd been running a food truck in Dayton. Vanessa hired a part-time social media manager named Keely, a 24-year-old with a ring light and a content calendar. Revenue climbed. $310,000 in 2018, $475,000 in 2019, and then 2020, the year the pandemic shut down every banquet hall, wedding venue, and corporate dining room in the state. They hit $540,000. Because Dean, who is smarter than anyone in his family gives him credit for, pivoted the entire operation to boxed meal kits and corporate drop-off catering within 3 weeks of the first shutdown. He redesigned the menu. He renegotiated delivery logistics. He personally drove a refrigerated van to office parks in Columbus at 6 a.m. every Monday. Vanessa posted about it on Instagram. The caption, "Caldwell Resilience. This is what 4 generations of grit looks like." She used a photo of Dean loading the van. She tagged herself as the photographer, and her narrative kept growing. She started calling herself co-owner on LinkedIn, a title that didn't exist in the operating agreement. She told the Meadowfield Chamber of Commerce, in a written application for a small business spotlight feature, that the Tillman Avenue renovation was funded by reinvested profits and family savings. She gave an interview to a small business podcast called Built from Nothing where she said, "And I listened to this recording 3 times, sitting in my home office, with my headphones on, and a legal pad in my lap. We've never taken outside money. Not a dollar. That's the Caldwell way." I was 12 feet from the kitchen she was describing. The kitchen that existed because I trusted my husband with my dead father's money. I told Dean. He winced. He rubbed the back of his neck, a thing he does when he knows he should act but doesn't want to fight. He said, "She's just proud, Renata. She doesn't mean anything by it. She's just performing." I said, "She's performing with my money, Dean." He didn't respond. I let it go. I let it go after the podcast. I let it go after the chamber feature. I let it go after she told a vendor named Marcia Sims that the family had never borrowed a cent. I let it go after she posted a TikTok, in 2022, standing in the Tillman Avenue kitchen, running her hand along the stainless steel counter I paid for, and saying, "This is what happens when a family bets on itself." 6 times. I let it go 6 times. I kept a list in a notebook. Dates, platforms, exact quotes where I could get them. I didn't know why I was keeping the list. I told myself it was just a habit from my analyst days. Document discrepancies, flag inconsistencies, build the file. The breaking point wasn't loud. It was a Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. I drove to the Caldwell & Sons office, a small room off the main kitchen, with a desk Earl had used since 1994, and a filing cabinet that still had paper invoices from the Bush administration, to pick up a tax document Dean had left for me. K-1 forms. Routine. Vanessa was on the phone. She didn't see me come in. The door was open. I heard her before I saw her. She was talking to a man I later identified as Howard Fish, a managing partner at a regional food service investment fund based in Cincinnati, called Fish Capital Partners. Vanessa had been courting him for months, trying to bring in outside capital for a second location, a fact she hadn't mentioned to Dean. And she said this: "The family put in everything ourselves. My brother married well. His wife comes from a comfortable background. But the business? This is blood. This is legacy." She married into the money, not the other way around. She laughed after she said it, a short, dismissive laugh, the kind of laugh that isn't really amusement. It's punctuation. It's a period at the end of a sentence that says she doesn't matter. I stood in the doorway for 9 seconds. I know because I was holding my phone, and the screen timer was running from a call I'd just ended. 4:37 and counting. 9 seconds of standing still, while my sister-in-law erased $390,000 of my life with a laugh and a lie. I left the office. I drove home. I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes with the engine off and the windows up. I didn't cry. I didn't call Dean. I stared at the garage door and thought about my father's post-it note. Not for fixing, for building. Then I called Priya Menon. Priya didn't tell me what to do. She told me what I had. There's a difference, and it matters. She reviewed the promissory note, the operating agreement, including Section 9.4, and the LLC's current financials, which Dean had always shared with me transparently. She pulled the county recorder filing to confirm the note was properly perfected. She reviewed Vanessa's public statements, the podcast, the LinkedIn bio, the chamber application, and said something I wrote down on a legal pad and kept in my desk drawer for the next 4 months. "Renata, the most dangerous person in any business, isn't the one who lies about the money. It's the one who forgets where the money came from. She told me the note was current. Dean had never missed a payment. 14 months ahead of schedule, actually. But she also told me that Section 9.4 gave me extraordinary leverage if I ever needed to use it. She said, "You're not a member of this LLC. You're not an owner. You're a secured creditor. And in a dissolution scenario, secured creditors get paid before members divide a single dollar." I wasn't planning revenge. I want to be clear about that. I was building a file. I was organizing information. I was doing what I'd been trained to do at Braddock and Weil. Trace the capital, document the discrepancy, prepare for the conversation that hadn't happened yet. For 4 months, I documented everything. Vanessa's public statements, her podcast transcript, her LinkedIn edits, the Chamber of Commerce spotlight, the Instagram captions, the TikTok, screenshots, timestamps, archived web pages saved as PDFs, a spreadsheet with columns for date, platform, exact quote, and whether the statement was provably false or merely misleading. I wasn't angry. I was organized. There's a difference, and most people don't learn it until the difference is all they have left. The trigger came in August 2023. Dean and I had a fight. A real one. Not about Vanessa, about something personal, private, between us. The kind of fight married people have, where exhaustion meets resentment, meets a sentence that starts with, "you always," and ends with something neither of you can take back. We separated for 3 weeks. He stayed at his mother's house. I stayed in our home. I watered the plants. I went to work. I didn't tell anyone. During that separation, Vanessa made her move. She called a meeting of the LLC members, Dean, herself, and Dolores, who held a silent 10% interest she'd never once exercised. Vanessa proposed amending the operating agreement to remove Section 9.4 entirely. She framed it as housekeeping. She told Dean it would clean up the document. She told Dolores it would simplify things in case Renata and Dean don't work out. She was trying to erase my fire exit while the house was already smoking. Dean called me from his mother's kitchen at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. His voice was tight. "Careful," he said. "Vanessa wants to change the operating agreement. She wants to take out the section about creditor rights. Renata, I think she's trying to cut you out." That was the moment. Not the insult on the phone call, not the podcast, not the 6 accumulating erasures on my list. This was the confirmation, the proof that it wasn't carelessness. It wasn't pride or performance. It was strategy. I didn't raise my voice. I said, "Don't sign anything. Don't initial anything. Don't agree to anything verbally. I'll handle this." I called Priya the next morning. She said, "Any amendment to an operating agreement that materially impairs a secured creditor's rights without that creditor's prior written consent is voidable under Ohio Revised Code Section 1706.15. She can propose it. She cannot effectuate it." Then Priya said something else, quietly, almost gently. "But Renata, you should stop waiting for this to resolve on its own. Waiting is what got you here. It won't get you out." She was right. The Meadowfield Chamber of Commerce Annual Small Business Awards dinner was scheduled for Saturday, October 14, 2023. Caldwell and Sons had been nominated for Legacy Business of the Year, a category that, as far as I could tell, was created specifically because Vanessa had lobbied the chamber board for 6 months. She'd written the nomination application herself. She'd submitted photos. She'd drafted the acceptance speech. 230 attendees, local press, the deputy mayor, every vendor, client, and competitor in the county. White tablecloths, dried lavender centerpieces. Vanessa's choice. I didn't plan what happened next as revenge. I planned it as correction. Documentation delivered to the right people at the right time, through the right channel. On October 12, 2023, 2 days before the dinner, I had Priya send a formal letter to Caldwell and Sons Catering LLC, attention all members, via certified mail and simultaneous email. The letter stated that as the holder of a $390,000 promissory note secured by the LLC's assets, I was requesting formal acknowledgement of my creditor status in any public materials describing the company's capitalization or funding history. It cited 3 specific public statements by a company principal. It didn't name Vanessa, just a principal, that materially misrepresented the source of the LLC's capital improvements. It requested a written correction be issued within 30 days. The letter was not a threat. It was a fact, wrapped in a deadline, sealed in an envelope. Vanessa called Dean within 90 minutes. She was furious. She said I was trying to sabotage the awards dinner. She said I was bitter and pathetic. She said I should be grateful I married into a family with something to show for itself. Dean didn't argue. He said one sentence. Renata funded the entire kitchen, Van. All of it. You know that. She hung up. The dinner was at the Meadowfield Country Club. October in Ohio. Cold enough for a coat. Warm enough to leave it in the car. I wore a navy dress I'd bought in 2019 for a work dinner I'd never attended. Dean and I arrived together. We had reconciled 4 days earlier, not with a dramatic conversation or a tearful apology, but with a Tuesday night, 2 glasses of wine, and one sentence from Dean that I'll carry for the rest of my life. I don't want to lose you, and I don't want to keep being the person who stays quiet while you disappear. Vanessa was already at the podium table when we walked in. She saw me and her face didn't fall. It stilled. Not anger, calculation. She was running numbers behind her eyes. At 7:40 p.m., the chamber president, a man named Arthur Drayton who owned 3 dry cleaning franchises and chaired every committee he could find, introduced the Legacy Business of the Year award. He read a short description of Caldwell and Sons, family-owned, 4 decades, community pillar. Then he invited Vanessa to accept. She walked to the microphone. She adjusted it downward. She's 5'4". She smiled. She breathed in. This award belongs to my family, she began. To my grandmother, who started making food for church fundraisers in a kitchen smaller than most people's bathrooms. To my father, Earl, who turned those fundraisers into a business. To my brother, Dean, who keeps the kitchen running every single day with more grace than any of us deserve. And to me, she paused, and the pause was rehearsed. I could tell. Who made sure the world finally knew our name? She didn't mention me. Of course she didn't. At 7:47 p.m., I know the time because Dean checked his watch. A man in the 3rd row raised his hand. His name was Howard Fish, the investor from Cincinnati, the man Vanessa had pitched on the phone the day I stood in the doorway for 9 seconds. Howard had not been invited by Vanessa. He'd been invited by the chamber, because Fish Capital Partners was a regional sponsor. But Vanessa had sent him the company's pitch deck 2 months earlier, and as part of his due diligence, he had requested the LLC's capitalization documents. He'd found the promissory note. Howard stood up, gray suit, no tie, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and said, not unkindly, but clearly enough for 230 people to hear, I want to clarify something for my own records. The capital expenditure for the Tillman Avenue kitchen build-out, the $390,000, that was funded by your sister-in-law, Renata Caldwell, through a secured promissory note. Is that correct? The room didn't gasp. That's not what rooms do. Rooms lean. 230 people shifted forward in their chairs at the same time, like a tide pulling towards something it hadn't expected to find. Vanessa's smile didn't fall. It froze. Her mouth stayed in the shape of confidence, but her eyes left the room. I watched her blink 3 times in 2 seconds. That's a private family matter, she said. Howard didn't sit down. He said, it's filed with the county recorder and listed in the LLC's operating agreement. It's a matter of public record. Someone at table 11, I never found out who, whispered loud enough to carry across the silence. Wait, she paid for all of it? Dolores set her fork down, not dramatically, carefully, the way you set something down when you realize the surface might not hold it. Earl looked at his plate like it owed him an explanation. Dean reached under the table and took my hand. His palm was wet. His grip was steady. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Vanessa tried to recover. She leaned into the microphone and said, Renata has been a wonderful supporter of the family. Supporter. Like I was a donor. Like I'd dropped a 20 in a tip jar and gotten a thank you card. Arthur Drayton cleared his throat and moved the program along. The rest of the evening was polite. Stiff. The lavender centerpieces smelled too strong. Conversations at surrounding tables dropped to murmurs and then rebuilt themselves around a new center of gravity. The woman in the navy dress at table 7 who had apparently bankrolled the kitchen everyone was eating from. 3 people I'd never met approached me that night. One was a florist named Diane who supplied Caldwell and Sons with arrangements. She shook my hand and said, "I had no idea." One was a sous chef from a competing caterer who said, "That took guts." One was the reporter from the Gazette, who asked if I'd be willing to comment for a follow-up piece. I said no. I wasn't there for a story. I was there for the record. In the parking lot afterward, Vanessa found me by my car. Dean had gone to get the coats. The lot was half empty. Her heels clicked on the asphalt like a countdown. "You did this on purpose," she said. Her voice was shaking. Not with sadness, with the specific frequency of someone who has lost control of a narrative they thought they owned. "I sent a letter," I said. "I didn't invite Howard Fish. I didn't write his question. I didn't stand at that microphone and tell 200 people a story with a hole in the middle. You're trying to destroy this family. I funded this family, Vanessa." I said it quietly, not for effect. Because I was tired. There's a difference. She turned and walked away, her heels on the asphalt. Click, 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 like a clock that had finally run out of reasons to keep going. The fallout was not explosive. It was structural, beam by beam. Howard Fish withdrew his investment interest within a week. He told Dean, privately, but Dean told me, that he couldn't partner with a company whose public-facing principal had misrepresented its capital structure to him directly. "It's not about the amount," Howard said. "It's about whether the person at the microphone tells the truth when no one's checking." Vanessa's episode on the Built From Nothing podcast was quietly removed by the host after someone, and I genuinely do not know who, sent them the promissory note filing. Her LinkedIn bio changed overnight. Co-owner and creative director became director of client relations. The Chamber of Commerce spotlight was updated with an editor's note I never saw but Dean described as 2 sentences that undid 6 months of lobbying. 2 Caldwell and Sons employees left within 5 weeks. Keeley, the social media manager, quit after Vanessa screamed at her for not controlling the narrative around a Google review that mentioned the dinner incident. Keeley was 25. She cried in the parking lot and called her mother from the front seat of her car. Tomas, the sous chef Dean had hired from Dayton, gave 2 weeks' notice. He told Dean he didn't feel comfortable working for a company where the family can't be straight about where the money comes from. I didn't expect that. I didn't intend for anyone to lose their livelihood. That's the part they don't tell you about correction. It doesn't discriminate. It doesn't stay in the lane you drew for it. It moves through a system and touches everyone, including people who were just standing nearby, doing their jobs, making crab cakes. An innocent person got caught in the blast radius of someone else's lie, and I carry that. Dolores called me in November, a Thursday, late morning. She didn't apologize, not in the clean, declarative way you hope for. She said, "I didn't know how much you put in, Renata. Earl and I, we thought it was Dean's savings, or maybe a small loan. We didn't ask." I said, "It was my inheritance, Dolores. From my father. He saved it for 30 years so I could build something." She was quiet for a long time. I could hear her kitchen clock ticking through the phone. Then she said, "I should have asked. I should have asked where the money came from instead of just being glad it was there." That sentence, "instead of just being glad it was there," is the most honest thing a Caldwell has ever said to me. I held on to it like a stone in my pocket. Smooth, heavy, mine. Vanessa posted a statement on the Caldwell and Sons Instagram in December. It read like a press release drafted by a crisis communications intern. Passive voice, vague attribution, phrases like, "miscommunication around our company's history," and "we value all contributions to our continued success." She tagged me. She used a heart emoji. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. In January 2024, Vanessa sent me a text message. Not a statement, not a caption, not a press release. A text. 11 words. "I was wrong. I told people you married into something you actually built. I don't know how to fix that yet, but I'm sorry." I read it 3 times over the course of 2 days. I showed it to Dean. He read it once and said, "That's the first true thing she's said about you in 6 years." When I replied, I wrote, "Thank you. I don't need you to fix it. I need you to stop telling a story that doesn't have me in it." She didn't respond, but the Caldwell & Sons website was updated the following week. Under the Our Story page, between a paragraph about Douglas Caldwell's first church picnic and a photo of the Tillman Avenue kitchen, there is now a single sentence. In 2017, the company underwent a significant expansion, funded by a private investment from a family member, enabling the construction of our current kitchen and operational headquarters. It doesn't say my name, but it doesn't erase me anymore, and for now, that's enough. Dean and I are still married. We're not perfect. We see a counselor every other Thursday. A woman named Dr. Elaine Ansell in Columbus who once told us, "A good marriage isn't one where nobody gets hurt. It's one where both people agree that the hurt matters enough to fix." I wrote that down on the same legal pad where I keep Priya's quote. That pad is getting full. The promissory note is being repaid on schedule. Dean has never missed a payment, not once. I used a portion of the accrued interest, $11,400 over 2 years, to establish a scholarship through the Briar Falls Community Foundation. It's called the Gerald Oaks Memorial Scholarship. It goes to a graduating senior from Briar Falls Central who plans to study finance, accounting, or business administration. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl named Mariana Voss who wants to be a forensic auditor. I thought my father would have liked that. I thought he would have liked that his money, his quiet, patient, secret money, didn't just build a kitchen, it built a door, for someone he never met. I still have the post-it note, yellow, faded, his handwriting in blocky capitals, for Renata, not for fixing, for building. I keep it in my desk drawer next to Priya's quote, Vanessa's text message, and the K-1 form from 2017, the first year the business turned a real profit. 4 pieces of paper that tell 4 different stories about what it means to be the person who pays for something and then stands in the doorway, invisible, watching someone else take the bow. Vanessa and I are not close. I don't know if we ever will be. We are civil. She brought a casserole to our house last Easter and stayed for 40 minutes. She complimented the curtains. I thanked her for the dish. It was awkward, and it was enough. Dean told me once, after the dinner, after the fallout, after the silence that followed the silence, that he was ashamed, not of me, of himself, for letting it go on so long, for choosing peace over truth, for being the quiet one in a family that mistook his silence for agreement. I told him the same thing I'll tell you now. Silence isn't the same as agreement, but from the outside, they look identical, and the people who benefit from your silence will never be the ones to point out the difference. So let me ask you this, and I mean it. If someone erased your name from the thing you built, the thing you bled savings and inheritance and trust into, the thing your dead father's post-it note told you to build, would you send the letter? Would you sit at table 7 in a navy dress and wait for the question? Or would you keep standing 8 feet away, holding your glass, letting someone else tell your story? Comment legacy below if you've ever been the person who funded the table, but wasn't invited to sit at it. I read every single one. This story is fictional, created for dramatic entertainment, education, and reflection. But the feeling of building something in silence and watching someone else step to the microphone, that part is real for more people than you'd think. And if it's real for you, I hope you know, the document is always louder than the speech.